All right, welcome. We have a wide variety of speakers here today. I will put their names and titles and organizations in the chat. Put them in right now so that you can attribute them. We will be taking questions after the speakers. Today, a group of Baltimore County voters joined with the Baltimore County Branch of the NAACP, the League of Women Voters of Baltimore County, and Common Cause Maryland to file a federal lawsuit challenging the racially discriminatory and unlawful redistricting plan approved by the Baltimore County Council on Monday evening. Despite a massive outcry from local voters and many options to create a fair plan offered by the civil rights groups, the County Council voted for a plan that violates the racial fairness commands of the Voting Rights Act, which are meant to protect against diluting the voices of Black, Indigenous, and other voters of color, as well as BIPOC candidates. Voters who are individually challenging the illegal redistricting plan include Charles Sydnor, Anthony Fugett, Vickers Shelley, Danita Tolson, Sharon Blake, Gerald Morrison, and Naisha McCoy. We will hear from our speakers one by one, and please hold your questions until the end. And again, we are making a recording available of this later today. First, we will hear from Gerald Morrison. Let me pin you, Mr. Morrison, before you get started. Please go ahead. It's Gerald Morrison, first Vice President of the NAACP Baltimore County Branch.
Yes, good afternoon. Since 1909, the NAACP has been in the forefront of the movement to safeguard the rights of African Americans to participate in the political process. This movement began in 1870 with the passage of the 15th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which guaranteed African Americans the right to vote. In 1965, the Voting Rights Act reaffirmed this right and adopted additional protection to overturn local and state policies that were disenfranchising African American voters and prevented future methods of disenfranchisement. In the 65 years since enactment of the enactment of the Voting Rights Act, the NAACP has been called again and again and again to take action to enforce its protections against minority vote dilution. Baltimore County, one of those times is upon us now. This redistricting, if passed, is a violation of the 15th Amendment of the United States Constitution and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It continues to racially motivated practice of diluting African American voting strength by packing voters in one super major minority district and diluting and marginalizing African American voters in 6 other council districts. The Baltimore County NAACP urged the Baltimore County Council to reject the Redistricting Commission's redistricting plan for the following reasons: to support fair and equitable distribution with the 2020 census demographic statistics for Baltimore County, the 15th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, and the protections set forth by the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And however, they did not listen, and yesterday the Baltimore County Council passed a bill that drew what we firmly believe is an illegal redistricting map. We said if this act was taken, we would follow suit in the federal court by asking for redress through the courts. In response to what Baltimore County Council had executed, to date, we have decided to take this action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Morrison. Next, we will hear from Joanne Antoine, Executive Director of Common Cause. Just give me a moment and I will pin you to this to the screen.
I'm good to go.
Please go ahead.
Sorry, everyone. Good afternoon again, Joanne with Common Cause in Maryland. I'll keep my remarks short. I'd first just say that it's unfortunate that we have to gather here today. It's been weeks since the Councilmanic Redistricting Commission released its map proposal, which was met by sharp criticism from many throughout the county. The commission acknowledged that they could have, drawn an additional majority Black district and willingly chose to ignore that when sending their map to the council. But we were hopeful. Right? The council committed to going back to the drawing board after hearing from hundreds of their constituents who were all calling for 3 opportunity districts, one of which would have been an additional majority Black district. This is in addition to calls for more transparency throughout the redistricting process as well. And yet again, in this case, the council chose to ignore their constituents. They had an opportunity to draw maps in a public manner. They could have discussed the maps publicly. They could have held numerous hearings, to debate and to hear from more of their constituents, and even engaged with advocates who had drawn up map proposals or expert demographers. But instead, they chose to maintain the status quo here and continue to work behind closed doors. And I think the result here is a map that reflects their interests and not those of the people of Baltimore County. The council unfortunately missed what could have been a historic opportunity to do right by their constituents, specifically Black voters. And they've chosen to outright ignore the hundreds of emails, calls, testimony from people who sat for hours in a virtual hearing, where they were unclear about whether or not they'd be called next. I think coalition partners just the other day dropped off hundreds of petitions, and unfortunately, again, they ignored the public's calls for representative maps. And we had hoped, that the county would have worked to avoid what could be a costly lawsuit, but they've left us with no choice. I think as a state, we've had this reputation of being known for nationally being known for our partisan gerrymandering. I think a lot of members of the public may not even know what packing is. It's a tactic that we hear used in other states that is literally, weaponized against Black and brown people as a way to dilute their voice and their political power. And it's unfortunate that that is what the council has chosen to engage in, this time around. As a state, we're so much better than this. We expected the county council to do better than this. And to the Black voters, the Black residents in the county, they deserve better than this. So we are joining partners in signing on to this lawsuit because we know that voters shouldn't have to deal with the repercussions of this map for the next 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Next, we're going to hear from Erica McDonald, co-president of the League of Women Voters of Baltimore County. Erica, hold on just one moment and I will make sure that you're pinned. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Erica McDonald, co-president of the League of Women Voters of Baltimore County. The League of Women Voters mission statement is empowering voters, defending democracy. We're here today because the empowerment of all voters in Baltimore County is at stake. If Black voters in Baltimore County do not have equal representation, it is not only morally reprehensible, but it threatens the strength of our democracy. The Baltimore County Council racially gerrymandered new maps, diluting the voting power of racial minorities. Not only is it unconstitutional, racial gerrymandering also limits access to casting ballots for voters in packed districts. Districts that are majority minority are often understaffed on voting days, have workers who are poorly trained on voting procedures, utilize faulty or broken machinery, and most often have longer lines to vote like we saw in Randallstown during the presidential election. The League and other advocacy organizations have been criticized for advocating for fairness in our county's redistricting process. This is not an issue of partisanship. It is an issue of racial equity. Without maps that allow Black voters to choose leaders that represent them, we further racial disparities in Baltimore County. As a nonpartisan organization with a long history of protecting voting, we can assure you that there is no valid reason for racial gerrymandering. Despite arguments to justify drawing bad maps, for example, that there are no qualified Black candidates or qualified Black candidates should be found, maps must be redrawn to truly reflect the Black population in our community. There's no reason to object to giving the 30% of Black residents 2 majority Black districts instead of packing them into a single district. So we must push back. We must push back against the long history of racial inequality in representation in Baltimore County. We must push back when the will of the county's residents is ignored and subverted. We must push back against a map that meets local charter requirements but violates federal law. And we must push back when our elected officials serve their own interests before those of the people. The League has joined this lawsuit to protect the voice of Baltimore County's Black residents by demanding that the new approved maps be redrawn. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erica. Next, we will hear from Dana Vickers Shelley, an individual plaintiff and executive director for the ACLU of Maryland. You can go ahead, Dana.
Thank you. Baltimore County Council members have voted for a redistricting plan that is racially discriminatory. Despite being in clear violation of the Voting Rights Act, these elected officials remain determined to protect their own self-interests, their place and position above the rights of thousands of Black voters in the county, like me, who deserve fair representation. However comfortable council members might feel about passing an illegal plan, the Voting Rights Act still exists, and Black voters are determined to defend it and our right to have elected officials who represent us and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dana. Next, we will hear from Charles Sydnor, an individual plaintiff and state senator for District 44. Hold on just a moment and I will pin you. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank each of the plaintiffs in this case, as well as our counsel, for standing up for what is right and what is moral. This certainly was not a battle I was expecting from a Democratic-led county council, and joining this lawsuit is not something that I do lightly. I believe that our council would have done the morally right thing, and they have not. The problem, as I see it, and I think many of our earlier speakers had spoke to this, is in the passing of this map, the packing of Black people on the west side of Baltimore County. Many of our proponents for the map being changed made their voices heard. I know I individually spoke with our council people, thinking that I would be heard, sharing information about the damage that this map could do for a decade. And the county council has said that essentially their hands were tied and they were going to move forward. Interestingly enough, when it came time to vote, these maps were still amended by other communities. When we had people from my district who were asking that the map be amended to their benefit. We had communities like Villanova asking to be taken out of 4 and to be put into 2. So similar to some of the other proponents, I've been questioned publicly about the positions that I've taken. And a number of 2 council people have asked which communities I would be willing to divide. But I'd like to turn that question around and ask them, why did they feel it was okay to divide communities within my district? Why was Woodlawn divided between District 1 and District 4? Why did they feel it was okay to divide communities like Villanova and Willow Glen South between Districts 4 and District 2? Why did they feel it was okay to pack 73% of the Black community in District 4? This lawsuit, as I say, I don't take lightly joining, but if this is what one has to do to ensure that their voice is heard, I'm willing to step up for the constituents that I've heard from and force this county to do right by it. So again, I thank everyone for being here this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Senator Sydnor. Next, we will hear from Naisha McCoy, who is an individual plaintiff, voter in Baltimore County. Hold on one second, Naisha, while I pin you here.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
My name is Niesha McCoy, and I live in District 4 of Baltimore County, where Julian Jones is my county councilman. As a resident of the 4th District in Baltimore County, it is disgraceful that the Baltimore County Council has chosen to dilute and ignore the voices of minority voters like myself in favor of majority white districts in Baltimore County, thereby violating Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. They are doing a disservice to Baltimore County, and the Baltimore County Council must do better for all voters of Baltimore County, including minority residents.
Thank you so much, Naisha. And last, we will hear from Peter Richkes, co-organizer of the Baltimore County Coalition for Fair Maps. And then we will take questions after that. Let me just find Peter. There she is. Please go ahead, Peter.
Thank you. Again, my name is Peter Richkes, and I'm one of the organizers of the Coalition for Fair Maps. The organization came together once people around the county started watching the redistricting process, beginning with the commission. Their behavior and lack of accountability and lack of access worried everyone. And then they came out with their report, making it very clear they had no intention of acknowledging the changes that have happened in Baltimore County and no intention of changing the maps, with lots of excuses why not. The coalition includes people from all over Baltimore County and a number of organizations, community organizations, progressive organizations that are horrified by what has transpired, both the process and its lack of transparency and the results after last night's vote. We know that the voices of the people of Baltimore County are being ignored, have been ignored. Yesterday, members of the coalition delivered a stack of letters that have opposed this map on the basis of its violation of the Voting Rights Act and the process. We know that at least 165 letters opposing this map were not included in the public record posted on the Baltimore County website. even after we brought the matter to the attention of all members of the County Council. The council has complained, and did again last night, about all the opposition to their map. But then they ignored the voices of so many to maintain the status quo. We know that more than 80% of those who signed up to speak at last Tuesday's work session opposed the map. And of course, that was not really a proper public hearing. To say that members of the coalition are disappointed is to put it mildly. We're disappointed for our county. We're disappointed by our council. And we're concerned about the message it gives to the 48% of us who are non-white. How can the council be happy, and that's their word, with a map that dilutes the vote of almost half of their constituents? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peta.